A retired FBI counterterrorism agent warns that the latest attempt on Donald Trump's life will not be the last. The national correspondent for RealClearPolitics will explain why the Secret Service should not be taking a victory lap following the assassination attempt in Florida. And America might be moving away from Christianity, but we'll tell you why all hope is not lost. We have those stories and so much more. Blaze News Tonight starts right now. Welcome to the chaos. I'm Jill Savage. Today is Tuesday, September 17th. Could the inflammatory rhetoric from the left have caused the second assassination attempt on Donald Trump? Former FBI counterterrorism agent Tim Clemente recently appeared on CNN to explain why he thinks the answer is yes. Matthew Peterson is the editor-in-chief of Blaze News, and Tim Clemente joins us now. So, Tim, thanks so much for joining us. On CNN, you said that the would-be assassin probably was spurned on by much of the political diatribes of our time. So can you dive into that and explain that a little bit more?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I think that it's impossible to separate the vitriol that's been thrown at Donald Trump from the attacks that have been directed at him. It's just not possible to say there's no combination of those two that makes it worse than it would have been without the political diatribes against him. I mean, he's compared to Hitler. What was Hitler? You know, there's the example that people have been using for generations now that if I could kill Hitler when he was a baby, would it be justified to prevent what he did? So if you're going to look at Donald Trump as being anything like an equivalent to Hitler, you're looking at a man that needs to be stopped and killed at any possibility at any point in his life. And so I don't think it's possible that you can have the mentally deranged human beings that we have wandering around our nation at this point not be affected by that kind of vitriol.
Tim, I very much appreciated your appearance on CNN. I thought it was very, very interesting. Can you talk a little bit about this latest would-be assassins? You know, you said, I think he was extremely politically motivated. Can you talk about that sort of motivation and break down the profile of this person in your view?
Well, first of all, Matt, you got a 58-year-old male, a grown man. He's not a 20-something, a young man whose brain is still possibly forming. In the case of the guy in Pennsylvania, I'm not sure his brain ever properly formed. But this individual voted for Trump in 2016, he says. He claims that. I believe him. I have no reason not to believe him. But then he turned against Trump, and he made Trump his enemy. He reached out to Hillary Clinton on social media and asked her to run for the good of the country. And so he obviously did not like some of what Donald Trump did, I guess, as president. I'm not saying that this guy makes any sense at all, because the one thing we can't do is try and use logic and sense to understand what is senseless. But in this guy's mind, I believe that he thinks Trump has become his enemy. And as his enemy, like the enemies in Ukraine that he wanted to fight, I believe this guy was willing to do anything and everything to stop Trump. And it's clear from his intentions on Sunday, laying out there in basically a sniper's nest behind that chain link fence and in those bushes for 12 hours or so, laying in wait behind a rifle with a GoPro camera at the ready, that he was not only going to take Trump out of the equation, but he was going to document it so that, you know, for the sake of posterity and for his own pleasure, he would have that recorded in history. And I think he's mentally deranged, obviously, and that's pretty clear from a lot of what we hear about him. But I think also he's ideologically driven. He had a mindset where he thought Trump was on his side, and once he realized Trump was not on his side ideologically, he became his enemy. And his intention was, of course, to kill Trump because of that.
One of the things that we do know about him is the would-be shooter, that is that he really enjoyed going over to Ukraine and recruiting others to come with him as well. I know. Let's go ahead and take a listen to him explaining what he was doing with Ukraine.
Good morning. Most wonder what I'm doing in Ukraine. This is about a center to help people when they come from other countries around the world have a location, someone to talk to as a greeting committee. to get them in the location that they need to be. So that's the whole focus of this project, is to help foreigners be as useful as possible. So that's our mission and job here, to get everybody where they need to be to maximize their potential.
So, Tim, when you look at that video and also just know how he was trying to recruit people over to fight in Ukraine, what do you make of that?
I think the objective maybe wasn't so much fighting for Ukraine as it was fighting against Russia. And I think he saw the Russians as the boogeyman, as the bad guys in this, as most of the world does. But I think there's a possibility, and I can't say this with absolute certainty, but with all the vitriolic language that was directed at Donald Trump in his first term, the Russia collusion hoax, it's possible that after 2016, this guy thought Trump was one thing, that he would be the enemy of Russia, and then was listening to all the ridiculous nonsense about Trump being a Russian asset and being very closely aligned with Russia and having been elected because of Russia, that it's possible that this guy just has despised Russia for a long time, and that made him hate Trump and want to go fight in Ukraine. I mean, those two things logically make sense together. Trump has talked about ending the war, not about supporting Ukraine in victory, but about ending the war in Ukraine. And as someone who might think that Ukraine was a tremendous victim here and Russia was a tremendous bully, it might sound like that's unfair of Donald Trump to go after Ukraine, to say, hey, you have to give something up so there's a negotiation to settle this. Again, these are speculations on my part, but I'm basing this on what I've seen and heard about this guy, who, again, certainly wasn't of sound mind.
Tim, I want to push a little bit on what based on what some people are saying out there. As editor in chief, I have to entertain a lot of different ideas in my head at the same time. But I want you to sensibly walk me off the ledge, okay? Because if I look at this, as opposed to the last shooter who very much more fits the profile for those of us observing as a lone gun kid who kind of snaps, maybe he was bullied, whatever. Here we have someone who has spent many years, right, both engaged in criminal activity, never going to jail, never going to prison after many felonies in North Carolina, and then spends a lot of time with, not entities that aren't exactly unrelated to the national security interests of the United States and are adjacent to that apparatus. Right? He spends a lot of time doing that. So, okay, maybe he's not mentally all there, but he's mentally there enough to be quoted by the New York Times, to be quoted by Semaphore as someone who's part of the NGO structure right next to the national security apparatus to move money, weapons, and people into Ukraine. I don't have to be a crazy conspiracy theorist, right, to say, and then he 12 hours before Trump appears at this golf course happens to know that the president is going to be there that day. Was he staking him out every Sunday? Was that what he was doing for fun, right? There's a lot of facts here that lend themselves certainly to speculation as to how he was influenced and whether there aren't larger forces at play, be they international or elsewhere. And I just want to throw that to you because I think it's sort of obvious on its face, right? I mean, a lot of people are going to take those facts and say, okay, well, this guy makes Lee Harvey Oswald look like an average citizen, Yeah,
Matt, I really don't know how to answer that other than to say the problem with most large conspiracies is that they break down because secrecy is very hard to keep, especially if you have a large group involved. And, it's why the mafia's famous slogan was two people can keep a secret as long as one of them is dead. And so I don't play into a lot of the bigger conspiracies because it's very hard for more than one person to keep the tale from getting out. Now, it doesn't mean that this guy wasn't a useful tool of the intelligence community or assets related to the intelligence community in Ukraine, and that there could have been some, corrupt or otherwise nefarious individuals that were involved with him and steered him in this direction, suggested it, and maybe even supported him. I don't know. And as far as answering the question of how he knew Trump's whereabouts and that he would be on that golf course, Now, it's possible it's a lucky guess. Maybe he knows that Trump likes to play golf on Sundays. And so for the last 16 Sundays, he's been out by the golf course there watching for Trump. And on this Sunday, he decided to act. We won't know until the investigation is completed. And hopefully this is a fairly open investigation and the details are revealed to try and tamp down some of these conspiracies. Because the problem is, especially with the situation in Pennsylvania, that the suspect's exterminated by a sniper round, and then that pretty much ends the dialogue that the FBI and other agencies have with the media. There hasn't been a lot of information revealed since July 13th to the public to assuage some of the public's concerns. And just like 911, if you don't reveal information, people make up their own. And the fact that there were no images of the plane hitting the Pentagon that were clear, some people means there was no plane hitting the Pentagon. And I literally get attacked on X and Twitter constantly for having defended the truth of the situation on 9/11, that Al-Qaeda flew planes into the Pentagon, World Trade Center, and into Shanksville, Pennsylvania. So in a case like this, nothing's impossible. It's of course possible that this guy was a tool and that he was used as a tool on Sunday as well. And hopefully we'll find that out. Hopefully there'll be communications. There'll be hard copies of documentation to record what his record was, as if he did work with the NGOs and the intelligence community. And then maybe we'll have some names associated with that can be looked at more closely and see if there was anybody on the government side that may have been involved in this. Because we can say for a fact that there are a lot of people in the United States government that very much dislike Donald Trump.
Absolutely. Tim, the great thing, and I just want to praise you again, I really thought it was a masterful interview on CNN. And I think you articulated what a lot of people in this country on both sides think, who are regular people, which is that there seems to be an okay, a get out of jail free card when it comes to rhetoric against Donald Trump. And I think honest people on both sides, I think it's a non-partisan point. But do you have any thoughts about why this seems to be so one-sided, that rhetoric seems to be condemned on one side and not the other? And you've been in the media and the FBI. You have an interesting background. What is your understanding of how we get out of this? I mean, do you think it's lopsided? And then how do we get out of this situation and restore some kind of regular dialogue in this country?
It's completely lopsided. And I think the problem is Donald Trump is an outsider, and he's the highest ranking outsider in American history. I don't think we've had another president that just came from totally outside of politics, outside of any party, outside of the military, outside of the government itself in any capacity, and rose to that the rank of commander-in-chief of the United States military and the president of the United States. And I think there's a lot of animosity for him because of that, because he doesn't have all of the chits, CHITS, that people have in his basket, saying, you owe me for this because I did this for you. All those political favors that politicians rise having to gather and use to get to their, the pinnacle of their careers. And, you can see that Joe Biden obviously had many, not just domestically in politics, but internationally. And Kamala Harris obviously has hers. She was very intimately friendly with some high-level politicians, Willie Brown especially in California, that helped her ascend to the highest ranks in California. And I'm sure she has a lot of other people she's paid favors to or owe favors to now that she's trying to rise to the presidency. Donald Trump didn't have that. He was even if you don't want to call him a self-made man because he inherited some of the business and obviously some of the wealth from his father, he still is a businessman that was outside of government completely. And because of that, nobody can put pressure on him. And I think that really disturbs a lot of people in Washington because there's no way to pull his strings. Sure, you can get him mad as you saw last Tuesday, and you can get under his skin by saying things, but you can't make him do anything he doesn't want to do. Nobody's got anything that they can hold over him. They've tried the lawfare, they've tried attacking his business, and it just doesn't work. Donald Trump is his own man. And, we can all wish that he was more articulate and could speak like Ronald Reagan and didn't tweet like a 9-year-old. But, if that's what you get and the end result is a guy that's a solid leader that actually cares about America, well, there's 75 or 80 million people that will accept that and vote for him.
It's a pretty good trade-off, Tim. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Our next guest will outline the suspicious circumstances that allowed the would-be Trump assassin to get so close to his target. Don't go anywhere. What's better than at the end of a long day grabbing one of your favorite glasses of whiskey? But hey, if it turns out that with every glass you're actually helping to support an American cause, doesn't it make it just that much better? Well, it's time to chart your own course with Flying Ace whiskeys from Craft Co. Inspired by generations of American aviators and proudly made right here in the United States, Flying Ace is not only making amazing whiskeys, they're also committed to supporting our brave troops and their families through their partnership with Folds of Honor. They're providing scholarships to the families of Americans fallen or disabled, and these scholarships allow families to begin to chart their own new course after experiencing great sacrifice. Flying Ace whiskeys are American proud because they're American made, and they're American proud because they're helping to support our heroes and their families. So don't wait around. Today's the day to get your own and see what the hype is all about. Buy online at flyingacespirits.com. Use the code AMERICA to get free shipping. That's flyingacespirits.com. Code AMERICA for free shipping. One of the biggest questions surrounding the latest assassination attempt is how would the would-be assassin, how was he allowed to get onto Donald Trump's golf course undetected? RealClearPolitics national political correspondent Susan Crabtree recently asked that very question as a post on X, and she joins us now. So, Susan, thanks so much for your time. So, what should the Secret Service have done better on Sunday?
Oh, where do we start? So when President Biden golfs in Wilmington, I'm told by sources in the Secret Service community that they shut down the golf course. The perimeter is secured and monitored by Secret Service agents, and all of the roads around it are shut down. So compare that to what we saw on Sunday, and it's completely different. It's interesting that this car, the assailant's car, alleged assailant, was parked somewhere in the parking lot or along the road, and nobody noticed that occurred. Also, I've been screaming this from the mountaintops on X and elsewhere. There were no drones in the sky that day. I have that confirmed today. Drones can do a lot of things in terms of surveil a golf course. That's a very big open air area. Why wasn't there a drone there? I'm actually told that local law enforcement got offered the drone after the incident and they used it. Is this mind blowing? Ron Rowe a month ago had a all hands pep talk to the Secret Service. He mandatory all hands. Every employee in the Secret Service. He promised them technological advances. He promised them that he would make sure that they were pushing forward with that to reverse a trend in the Secret Service. The big joke in the Secret Service is yesterday's technology tomorrow. We always mess it up with our technology. We're not embracing the advancements. He promised them that would change. And we saw on Sunday that it didn't change.
Susan, you said that actually you had heard that inside, it had been reported to you inside the Secret Service, the higher ups had said they weren't needed. The drones weren't needed, which is mind blowing after Pennsylvania. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous. And for people listening, the drone would have detected the thermal heat. We had Steve Baker and others talking about this yesterday. It's under $3,000. You can buy one. I think it's in the $2,000 range. You could have a drone that is heat seeking. You would know that there's someone there. I want to go to the why. I mean, what are the reasons you've heard for these failures in this case?
Well, in terms of the drones, there's just this entrenched belief in the Secret Service community, and even I have older sources in the Secret Service community that believe that They really should be using manpower instead of technology when it comes to that. Technology cannot replace manpower. But my response to that is why not have both if you can? The people inside the Secret Service community have been pushing for this since 2016. I have been covering the Secret Service for 12 years, and this was an issue in 2016 that I covered, and now here we are. And we've had 2 assassination attempts within 2 months. So the rationale, when the source told me today that there was an internal discussion and a person in leadership said, we didn't need it on Sunday. Well, then why did you use it after the fact? Why did you borrow it from local law enforcement, after the fact? So that you can make sure that there were no other assailants, so you could see where Ryan Rauch was going. I mean, it makes no sense. They were covering for themselves, and the Secret Service should not be taking a victory lap. Yesterday was a joke. That conference was, you could tell that Ron Rode was being defensive because he's yelling. He was sort of yelling, and we did a great job. It was textbook. No, my sources in the Secret Service community are highly critical of each other. The heroes that day were the special agent that saw the barrel pointing out of the brush. He is a hero, and the witness who actually saw the guy fleeing and then got into his car and took down the license plate. Those are the heroes, not the leadership didn't do a sweep of the perimeter. They always did a sweep of the perimeter when Joe Biden golfed. And then now he's saying, well, Ron Rowe said, well, this is an OTR. That means off the record, that it wasn't on the schedule. So we really don't plan for those things, and we shouldn't be doing a perimeter sweep. Well, I'm told specifically that if Biden goes golfing, there is a perimeter sweep, and you can do that with canines. So this is not a win for the Secret Service. This is absolutely a failure. And there were 2 heroes that day, and it was narrow escape. Once again, a narrow escape. If it were not for those 2 people, the assailant would be at large, and who knows what would have happened with Ryan Roach with that gun aiming toward the president.
Susan, you bring up a great point. I wanted to ask you, why would Ronald Rowe go out there, and he essentially is blaming Donald Trump for an off-the-record, an OTR event. So how does this align with the person who is at the now acting head of the top of the Secret Service, trying to keep the asset safe? How are you blaming him now at this point in time?
Well, I really, truly hope that he was misspeaking, that he was sort of saying, oh, that's an off the record, meaning, well, he decided to go to the golf course. Okay. Trump has some leeway in what he does, but you cannot treat these golf course outings as off the records anymore. Post J13, it is not normal situation as normal. Everything, you have to reevaluate everything. There needs, as I wrote yesterday in a story on RealClearPolitics, there has to be a reckoning with the Secret Service. I hope it happened yesterday in his meeting between Donald Trump and Ron Rowe. I would love to have been a fly on the wall in that meeting, because things need to change. You need to come to grips with, can you protect me on a golf course? Can I go golfing? Because why didn't you sweep it? Why didn't you sweep the perimeter? You would have found him. Why didn't you use drones? I hope they're having those discussions, because he needs to know if there's this off the record, which, it's like when Biden goes to get an ice cream or goes to the Waffle House the day after his debate with Jill Biden. That was an off the record. It means it's not on the public schedule. So we're kind of going to ad lib it as we go along. But we know that President Trump golfs usually on the weekends, and he golfs at this golf course. He owns it. So you lose the element of surprise if you say, oh, it's an off the record, so we're not going to man up for this. We're not going to plan for this. We're not going to sweep the perimeter. There's no excuse for it after July 13th. There's just none.
Susan, the big question, one of the big questions on everyone's mind is how this guy knows that Trump is going to be at the golf course. Now, Trump does golf there frequently. It could be the case that this is how he spent every Sunday night, Saturday to Sunday, camping out for 12 hours. But what have you heard inside the Secret Service community? Because I would like to hear more official answers to this, at least speculation, like these are the options, because clearly there is reason to think that this information might have been leaked in some way.
Right. And so I will go with I will clearly delineate between what I know and speculation. Okay. Because I don't like to get in, I like everything to be evidence-based, but at this point we need some speculation as long as it's informed speculation. So I will say that, obviously he golfs there a lot. The guy could have been hiding out. He could have talked to a bartender at the clubhouse. Or it could have gotten out word on the street, which is normal. Oh, the president's playing golf today. Okay, that's one school of thought, right? The more sinister and speculative school of thought, and I have reported on this on some things about this, and I might be able to. I just say, stay tuned more on this story. But what I have reported is that I talked to a former Obama senior intelligence official who told me that their Iranian assets have penetrated some of our protective services agencies. And they wouldn't specify, but they said diplomatic security services, Secret Service, and air marshals. And I'm not trying to be conspiratorial, but the Iranians are not playing around here. They want to kill Donald Trump. They want to kill John Bolton, his whole national security team that made the decision to go after General Soleimani and kill him in Baghdad in early 2020. So we know that for a fact. We know that Iranians have compromised other people in the Biden administration, including Rob Malley, the Iran envoy, either wittingly or unwittingly. I always put that in there. They, who knows if they intended to be, they knew they were being compromised at the time. But, Mr. O'Malley is no longer working, I believe he's on admin leave still. So there's a Semaphore article that goes into this in great detail. I would say read that, and also read my article that says, is Iranian spying hurting our efforts to protect Donald Trump, Joe Biden, and others? I think there's something to this. The Secret Service is not being diligent about how they are hiring and admitting their applicants. I have, in that article about Iranian spying, I have confirmed that they gave an individual, and I believe it's Pakistani, by heritage, citizen, U.S. citizen, they polygraphed this person. The person failed the polygraph, okay, on terrorism-related issues. The terrorist section, they failed, and they pushed them through, and this person is currently working at the Secret Service. I am getting the name of that person. I'm not saying that this person has anything to do with it, but it's concerning that they're allowing someone who failed the terrorist section on the polygraph to work for the Secret Service.
Absolutely. Susan, my last question for you is, now there have been 2 attempts on Donald Trump's life. Will the Secret Service be changing any of their protocols?
Well, certainly they're a reactive agency, even though Ron Rowe a month ago with his pep talk to his all hands meeting, he said they weren't going to be reactive anymore, but that's their history, and it looks like they are now. So yes, I mean, he has said that they need more resources. There's lots of excuses. They are down 650 agents for the UN General Assembly in New York this week, so they're borrowing from the military, and that will continue, they announced, until the inauguration. So they're going to have military officers supplementing. They already have the Homeland Security investigators supplementing. But obviously there was a reckoning in that meeting between Roe and Donald Trump, and they're not telling me, but if you look on my Twitter, I did go into all the assets. I did quote the Secret Service spokesman telling me, I think it was this morning or last night, all the assets they now have. So that's just shy of what the president has, but they won't tell me if they use them in these OTRs. I know they're going to bring the canines now. I mean, I would hope that they would bring in the canines and do sweeps like we all see them doing. If anyone lives in Washington and it's been around the Secret Service, there's always sweeps with canines before an event. Let's hope they do that. I mean, I think it's more than common sense at this point.
Absolutely. Susan, thanks so much. And everybody should definitely follow your work on X. You do some excellent reporting so far on all of these assassination attempts. Hopefully it's the last one. Thanks so much for your time, Susan.
God willing. Thank you so much for having me.
A former California Democrat explained why she's leaving the Democratic Party. Up next. After more than 235 years, the radical left is saying that we need saving from the Constitution. And they're starting by working to end the independence of the Supreme Court. And they want to create their own supermajority by packing the court with enough hand-picked justices to get the outcome that they want. And even President Biden has gotten into the act by making reforming the court one of his final priorities before he leaves office. But don't be fooled, because their end game is really court packing. At First Liberty, we call this an assault on the court for what it really is, a Supreme Court coup. These extremists want to eliminate the court's conservative majority by packing the Supreme Court with their own hand-picked justices to get the outcome that they want. And the frightening thing is that come January, their plan could become our nation's reality. The simple majority vote in the House and Senate combined with the president's signature could turn their plan to pack the court into law. But right now, if we unite our voices, if we take action together, we can put a stop to the radical left's plan to take control of the Supreme Court. The future of the court, of preserving an independent judiciary, is literally in our hands. And that's why we're taking action. And we need you to join us, because with 1 million patriots like you standing up for the court, we can safeguard the independence of the judiciary, just as the founding fathers intended. And by saying no to the leftist court coup, we can secure the blessings of liberty and protect the future of the constitutional rights of our children and grandchildren. Go to supremecoup.com/Jill. That's supremecoup.com/Jill to learn how you can help stop the radical left's takeover of the Supreme Court. I didn't leave the Democratic Party, it left me. It's a Ronald Reagan quote that might apply to our next guest. In a recent piece for theblaze.com, former California State Senator Gloria Romero announced her decision to walk away from the Democratic Party and join the GOP. She joins us now. So, Gloria, what was one of the biggest factors that you had when you were deciding to switch over to the Republicans?
Well, first of all, thank you so very much. It's an honor to join you today. This has been a political journey for me. It's been a while coming. Ultimately, I saw from the party that has called itself the Party of Democracy that 14 million votes were just invalidated. The primary season was wiped out, and that was already a rigged primary to begin with. So I think that was really the final push. But I can add a litany of efforts and issues overall that really turned me away from a party that I did not recognize any longer.
Gloria, speaking as someone who left California, 3 years ago, February, I read this with interest. I was aware of your career and things you had done over the years in politics. And I guess the biggest question I have is, I feel like there's a lot of people who agree with you, a lot of friends who, from LA that I know who are Democrats feel the same way, but I don't see a lot of actual movement. Maybe some people are leaving, I was more on the right already. But do you feel like your move here is sort of presages other people moving or changing, and that you represent a lot of people who maybe are unheard in the Democratic Party right now?
I would hope so. And I think it's important. And I think many of us saw, for example, Leo Terrell moved a while ago, Tulsi Gabbard, RFK Jr. And really when he made the decision to leave, enduring what he had endured as a Kennedy, the name, iconic in the Democratic Party, when he made his move, that's when I finally decided, you know what, it's time for me to pack up my bags and leave too. This past Sunday, I attended the AM 870 Town Hall Forum, and it was really interesting because I was greeted by many many Democrats who had already walked away, and they weren't elected officials. Many of them said, look, I was just an ordinary voter like many of us are. And they said, we walked away. So I believe there are many. We heard in Sacramento just a few weeks ago that another Latina, she's a state senator in the Central Valley, she moved away from the Democratic Party. Recently, an assemblyman who had served in parts of South LA, he announced that he didn't recognize his party either. So I think there is a movement. There is a lot more shift than people are willing to say. And even though some people have given me flack for moving away, I will tell you that I've had many messages come to me saying they are thinking of moving away as well. So it's a movement. The walk away is real.
Do you feel like your values or principles have changed, or do you feel like you've just changed the name, the little name that's next to yours with what it's representing at this point in time?
Well, I think if we start with the values of freedom, of democracy, of liberty, and I think too, regardless of which side of the aisle somebody's on, I think we can lay claim to that. For example, when I said I never would have believed that a primary would have just been thrown out completely and in the dark of night, like what I say, in Latin American dictatorships, when the elites get together and they use what we say in Spanish, the dedazo, the finger to point and tap who's going to be in charge. That's what happened in this country today, when we see not only one, but two assassination attempts. And still, my party, my old party, basically still justifying it, saying it's okay in the name of protection of democracy. It's unbelievable. It's very Orwellian. So when we talk about the values, I often point to say, look, I'm a mother. And that's a value in my life, motherhood. I am not a birthing person. So I think we take a look at how the label of being a Democrat, and my family was FDR, JFK, RFK. I don't know what the D stands for anymore, except that it was time to leave. So the values are me, but the values have been eroded in this party that's gone totally woke, and which many of us are just scratching our heads and saying, ya basta, goodbye, enough.
Gloria, have you faced any challenges because of this announcement? Have you faced some opposition, or do you have any conflict with friends? And do you have any advice for people who maybe are in your shoes who are thinking about this moving forward?
I think one just really has to examine their conscience. Say what is right for them. Yes, I've gotten hacked. I've been ridiculed with some people online. But, as they say, you have to have a thick skin to be in politics. And I've had a thick skin for quite some time. So it doesn't faze me. Overall, I think the reception has been very, very welcoming. The Republican Party has embraced me. I feel very happy. Steve Hilton, Congressman Kevin Kiley, the leader of the Republican minority, Assemblyman Gallagher, were all there to greet me and join with me, along with the chair of the statewide Republican Party. And it's been very, very gracious. Many Democrats as well. I think many of them have known me. They've known my fight for school choice over the years. So that has been a major issue, which has put me at odds with the Democratic Party for probably 20 years now. So probably many of them are not surprised any longer. So I think just the advice is examine your conscience. We have a country to save. If you don't recognize your party, there's a reason why. It's not us anymore. And it's time to just say goodbye. And there is a very warm, big new tent under, the blue collar billionaire businessman, Donald Trump, that I think has created space for the walkaways like me.
Gloria, as it says in the article, you are a feminist and former university professor. So if you can do it, anyone can. Come on over, everybody out there that's listening to us right now. Thanks so much for your time and sharing your story with us.
Yeah.
Thank you for allowing me to speak with you.
God's Not Dead in America or in movie theaters. We'll have the review from the film that the franchise latest installment. Don't go anywhere.
making God an easy target for them, Pastor.
God's not the target, Lottie. Our country is. God's just standing in their way.
Yes, they have made another one. In a recent piece for Blaze News, Christian Toto, founder of HollywoodInToto.com and the host of Hollywood in Toto podcast, wrote that the God's Not Dead franchise simply won't die, no matter how hard Hollywood tries to kill it. He joins us now. So, Christian, what is it about these movies that can withstand all of the efforts from Hollywood to tear it down?
Well, on the surface, it's unabashedly faith-based. And there's no equivocation here. That certainly appeals to a part of the country that isn't well served at the theater. The fact that there are some familiar faces that we know and have loved for years, including Scott Baio and Kevin Sorbo, Dean Cain, often they're in these films as well. That certainly helps. But, these films have had a curious overlap with the headlines of the day. Now, obviously, when you make a film, it doesn't get made today and get released tomorrow. There's a gap there. But, the last film in this series talked about homeschooling, Christian homeschooling in particular. The new film is showing politicians who have a lot of animosity toward people of faith. And we've seen that in the real world. Too many shocking headlines about, domestic terrorists and people protesting abortion centers and what happens to them, things like that. So I think the fact that the series tends to collide with reality in ways that you just don't see in other films or TV shows makes it appealing to a demographic that is just ignored.
Christian, I like to say, and who knows, but I feel as if my interpretation of these films is it's sort of a medieval morality play. It's for it's for an audience who doesn't get any kind of respect or attention anywhere else, and it sort of reaffirms pre-existing beliefs and values, which is something that every human being likes to see. But is there anything else here? I mean, you say a couple of things in this piece that interest me. Do you think that these films have evolved over time? Certain themes, say about faith or God, certain deeper themes has evolved over time in these movies, in this series?
Well, the first film in the series, which was wildly successful, was certainly red meat to the faith-based crowd. I think the newer films have toned that down a little bit, but it's certainly there front and center. I also think that, the movies and the stories are evolving with the culture. Like I said, that because of that headline overlap, I think that does matter. And, when you see a horror movie, the acting may be substandard, the writing may be weak, but a horror movie fan wants a certain visceral thrill from the experience. And I think with the God's Not Dead series, these are not great films. It's not bravura acting. It's not, Oscar quality entertainment, but it's solid. And the storytelling is straightforward. And there is an appeal to that, like you said, because if you're not getting this kind of story in any other place, then you're hungry for it. You're famished in a way. And I also don't want to downplay the fact that Scott Baio doesn't act that much anymore. And I think he's still able to act. He's certainly fine in the movie. Yes. But because his politics lean a certain way, there are people who are going to discount him and just say, listen, I don't want him for my project. That's the blacklist that I talk about all the time that's going on in Hollywood right now. So just the fact that there's a franchise out there that lets him into the fold, lets him ply his trade and do a fine job at it, I think that does matter, that there's a landing spot for actors who maybe don't fit the cookie cutter categories of Hollywood. They should work. Scott Baio should work. There's nothing wrong with him. He's been in Hollywood for decades. And the fact that they won't employ him, I think that speaks ill of the industry, not of Scott.
Now, we've seen so many of these movies in this franchise in particular. And I mean, let's be real, they're not getting any attention outside of shows like these. So at some point you have to say, okay, they're still making money. They're still very popular. Why aren't more people going to even just come on and just jump on to just grab that cash, even if they don't actually believe it? Because it's proven right now. The audience actually wants it. We prefer that they would believe the message as well, but the money is proving to be there.
It's the $1 million question. It's what I often report about Hollywood and ideology. And you can just point to late night TV. For years and years, late night TV was aggressively left of center. And you'd think that any entrepreneurial person would say, gosh, if we hired a Dennis Miller or an Adam Carolla and just put him on late night and said, hey, this is going to be a right-leaning show and see what happens, chances are it'd be pretty good. I mean, obviously, those are very talented people. I'm not talking about the talent. I'm just talking about the angle in play. And they wouldn't do it. So we had to wait for Fox to bring out Gutfeld. and now it's a roaring success. I think something similar happens with these kind of stories, and that they don't necessarily want to tell the tales being told, and so they're willing to leave some money on the table. Having said all that, Sony has a boutique label called Affirm, and they have been putting out some faith-friendly films, and even Lionsgate has dabbled in this arena. So I think there is some softening of the marketplace in this arena. But generally speaking, Hollywood is not too keen on telling these kinds of stories. I mean, if you go to Hollywood, a studio with a script like this, you're not getting in the front door. It's just not going to happen.
Well, Christian, thanks so much for joining us and breaking this down, because we need people like you to actually go out there and tell everybody what's going on in the real world. So thanks for joining us. My pleasure. Matthew, I think one of the biggest takeaways for me, again, we spent so much time on the Trump assassination attempt today. I think one of the questions that's on everybody's mind is they've done it now 2 different times, and will this be the last or not? And it was interesting to hear from Tim Clemente and Susan Crabtree on their thoughts.
Yeah, look, I think everyone who's sane at this point is very worried about it happening again and thinking that it probably will, just because the most normal reasons whatsoever. You don't need to go to conspiracy to know that this rhetoric has been building for a long time. It's built up over 8 years, and we're just beginning to see the poisonous fruit of this seed that they planted every day in people's heads, including some people who aren't all there for 8 years.
And Susan mentioned something about Iran, and we've seen those reports. They came out after the first assassination attempt that, maybe they were involved. But at this point, does it even matter which other country is involved? I mean, yes, we want to get to the truth if we can, but we know China, we know Russia, we know Iran. None of them are friendly towards Donald Trump.
Yeah, I think this is important for people to realize because, without going to any conspiracy theory, that there's certainly powerful interests that hate Donald Trump, right? So you would want to look to who those powerful interests are. And certainly those include multiple other countries that would want to assassinate him and also just cause chaos in America. So that's not a conspiracy theory. That's a logical question that needs to be answered in a straightforward way anytime anyone tries to assassinate a president of the United States.
And Donald Trump and his team need to just make sure that they go out there and say, you need a drone, you need the canines, right? This is what the guests were saying today. It's unreal that we had a J13 moment. None of those changes were implemented.
Yeah, I mean, you can go and buy a drone that's going to give you thermal view of the heat for under $3,000. So why isn't that up there? It would have shown this body in the tree line up to 12 hours before this event happened, because that's how long he was hiding there.
So somebody needs to hold the Secret Service accountable. Somebody needs to hold the media accountable. Somebody needs to hold the Democrats accountable. There's a theme here.
Yeah, well, that's why we're here. We're going to hold everyone accountable to the maximum extent possible, and we've only just begun on this show. So that's why we need your support.
It's like you knew where I was leading you there. You knew what was going on. So be sure.
Wise to your tricks.
You are. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform, and we'll be back with more tomorrow night.